Welcome everyone to our 17th Salon of the Maternal Gift Economy Breaking Through series, hosted by Genevieve, Vaughan, and the International Feminists for the Gift Economy. I'm Letecia Layson. I'm your moderator. We are very pleased to have Miigam'agan here. Sherri is logging on right now, so she'll be joining us in a moment. They've returned for part 2 of a wonderful salon that we had 4 weeks ago, Voices from the Land. They talked to us about the residential schools. I'm going to just do short intros because I'm hoping that you were here the last time, and if not, you can check our website, Maternal Gift Economy Movement.org, for the full bios for both of these really wonderful women. But Miigam'agan is in Canada. She's a Wabanaki grandmother of the Fish Clan. She is the mother of 3 adult children and a grandmother of 4. She's been devoted to the Wabanaki cultural revival and promoting an understanding of Indigenous matriarchal systems. Miigam'agan teaches grandmother teachings on the stages of life, on human developmental cycles, cultural history, and ceremonial roles and practices in women and men, drawing Wabanaki language as references. So we're glad to have you, Miigam'agan. And I'm going to introduce Sherri also, so that once I complete Sherri's introduction, Miigam'agan and Sherri will just take us into a conversation. They'll give us a little bit of an update. So Sherri Mitchell was born and raised in the Penobscot Indian Reservation. She calls in from the state of Maine. She's received her Juris Doctorate and a certificate in Indigenous Peoples Law and the Policy from the University of Arizona, James E. Rogers College of Law. So Sherri has done tremendous work in human rights, Indigenous rights, and she is the founding mother of a wonderful new piece of property that is bringing back Indigenous ways and creating that. And hopefully she'll tell us more about that. And we may have a bit of time for her to share a little bit about what's going on there. So I want to leave it to the two of you, Miigam'agan and Sherri. I know there's been a lot of things going on. One of the most recent things that I saw for Indigenous people in North America, both joys and sorrows. And one of the news items I saw was a group of Nez, I think that's what they're called, who were pushed out. They had 7.5 million acres in the Washington area and were pushed out. The land was taken from them in the 1800s, 7.5 million acres, moved to Idaho, and they most recently were able to purchase back 150 acres. And they rode back in ceremony, reclaiming that land. And that was in the news yesterday on horseback. So both the joys and the sorrows, remembering the things that happened and then gaining new and wonderful grounding with the earth. So I leave it to both of you. And thank you again for being with us and giving us your time, effort, and energy.
So thank you. So I think I'd like to begin our session today in offering thanksgivings to the life source for the good life that we've all have been experiencing as well. So I'll share that. I'll light the medicines and offer that. Thanks for the Thanksgiving on our behalf of our gathering. And then I'll pass this on to Sherri once I finish, and then we can begin with to revisit the conversations that we had last month, and then we'll proceed with discussions and the questions that people that are here today might have for what we talked about previously, the updates. So. Jijahamichina, Jiniskamichina, Miwedam Dandiligan Muyak Nimachuahan, Miwedam Dandil Mawaliak, Dandiligan Muyak Mokiganodi, Nastuodi, Edawachtamamk, Mige, Miguidedmananda, which you sit Hamudikup. About you Nahidan, Unahardan, and Tuluguahan Mino. Me wadwan, me wadmanen, ni majuwahan. Ahta deli genupsi gan kidno mahamikyo. Akiskuk dari niya nabi sultim. Wanahidam kahab banasik. Maduamug hadnam jiachto malkikanoti. Regularly no chitniga na. So much gratitude to all the ones that have taught our ancestors. Our ancestors were people of integrity. They were one with nature. They lived in harmony with our sacred mother and all of her children. From the land, and so I request our ancestors to awaken us further, to remember why we've returned, and to remember who we are, what our responsibilities are in being here and caring for life, our sacred mother. And more recently, what's developed for us in Indian country is a confirmation of the voices that our loved ones that shared when they returned from the Indian residential schools, and their stories that they shared. But we were unable to respond to that at the time because we were still in a very controlled environment, and our communities, indigenous communities across the land, were in lockdown for many generations and held in confined quarters in small parcels of land. And so we had the federal the government, the authorities, and the churches that controlled those areas. So, so what we've already known is finally revealed at this time. So it's good healing, and I want to thank all of you for inviting us back and continuing this conversation and how we move forward together. And so, anyway, I will leave it at that, and thank you. Much gratitude to all of you. I'll pass this to Sherri.
Lalio, Itabesk, Miigam'agan, and Kulasi Gulpa to everyone else. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. And Deliwisi Wanahamugwasa na Jioban Wapskewi, Silda and Donabama Gawasos, Noban Wapskewi, Nagakakagus Niltibayak. My name is, in my language, is Winnahamugwasit. I am from the Penobscot Nation. My family is Bear Clan from the Penobscot Nation and Crow Clan from the Passamaquoddy tribe of Zibayak. And I'm happy to be with you today, although I'm very, very tired. So since the last time we met, we have a newborn baby in my family. And she was born 6 weeks early and with some real challenges, and came into our family very unexpectedly. And so me and my daughter and my son-in-law and their 2.5-year-old daughter have been either at a hospital or a hotel room or between the two for 3.5 weeks. And this is actually my first day home with no small children around. And so I almost forgot about all of you wonderful women out there. So glad to be with you today. Really what we're coming here to talk about is something that has happened to our people that's horrific, that has happened to other people as well throughout time. But what it really is about is this notion, what for us in sorry, my dog is acting out over here. I'm trying to ignore him. He's distracting me. What we're really talking about when we're talking about what's going on in our communities, when we're talking about the evidence of the removal of the mothers from the center of our communities, from the removal of the matriarchs, is reminding people what the mothers always reminded people, bringing back this core message that the mothers and the grandmothers always carried. For us in our language, it's Pasita Bamosawagan Gajibut, which means that all life is sacred. And it was the role of the mothers and the grandmothers who ushered in life. The mothers ushered in life, and then they sang life out at the end, the grandmothers as well. And when we think about that role of holding those two endposts of the entry and the exiting of life, holding that life on both sides there, that teaching about that sacredness of our journeys together across time through our communities, our families, our nations, across Mother Earth, that all of those teachings about the sacredness of life are held in those hands of those mothers and grandmothers. And so when we had those mothers and grandmothers pushed out, we lost that understanding of the sacredness of life. People became statistics, and for us Skitchinawak peoples, for our Indigenous peoples, we were reduced to being less than peoples in order to make the killing of our peoples more palatable for those who came to harm us. And it's all about the taking of the land, the body of the original mother, Mother Earth. And so we have all of these things that are wrapped up in this that we're working through, that we're trying to understand, and to I have a lot of digestive issues because I'm very empathic, and there's a lot of things that I can't digest that happen in the world and that have happened in my life. And so as we're trying to move through this time, we're trying to metabolize what's happening to us through our bodies, and there's all kinds of things coming up for people in their bodies. There's a lot of physical healing crises that are happening for our people right now, and it's because they can't metabolize what's happening to them as they're facing the evidence of the cruelty that our people have experienced. And so today I would like to pose a question to all of those who are here, and so that we can all carry this conversation together. Miigam'agan just came out of 3 days of being in ceremony and has about 8 hours sleep. I've come out of about 3 weeks of heavy prayer and crisis with this little one who we didn't know whether she was going to decide to stay with us or not, if she was going to decide to stay here earthside. And so holding this little one in that space and being fully aware that she was really contemplating, is this the right time for me to be alive here? Is this the right circumstance for me to be alive here? And to honor the integrity of her spirit in that decision, and to want so badly for her to want to stay, but also to honor, that that's her spiritual decision, that she has to choose if this is the right circumstance for the life that she wants to live and the lessons that she wants to learn. And sitting in that holding space with her has really been powerful for me over the last 3 weeks. And at this point right now, it's looking like she's wanting to stay. She's starting to chunk out a little bit, which is really nice to see. And she's howling a lot to let us know that she's here, which she wasn't doing at the beginning because she was still thinking she was in the womb because she was so early. And so, it's just, there's a lot, as a grandmother now. Before I became a grandmother, I used to give Miigam'agan a hard time and say, let your kids take care of their own kids, come out and play with us. You've had enough time of raising kids now, come and do stuff with us. And now that I have my own grandchildren, I'm like, oh, geez, I get it now. Like, I understand that you can want to be somewhere else, but then where you need to be. And so where I've needed to be has been right with my family during this time. So there's a lot of lessons happening rapidly right now in the world. And I think we all are feeling the quickening of that in our bodies because, we've caused so much harm to the planet that we're beginning to feel the evidence of that harm in our bodies because we're also connected. And we're so connected to Mother Earth, that umbilical connection, that transfer from our birth mother to the Earth Mother at the time of our birth pulls on us, right? We can feel that. We can feel that pull of that in our bodies. And so, knowing that we're that connected, and knowing that we are feeling that pull, and we're also feeling the imbalance in our bodies of what's happened to Mother Earth. And seeing the evidence of the loss of humanity on many fronts is overwhelming. And I want to hold up that truth for us here today, that when we come together, that we're all feeling the heaviness of that. And that's a real thing. And one of the things that the patriarchy does is it tells us not to just to brush that off, and don't feel it. Don't feel the evidence of the harm that we're causing. Don't feel the impacts of the grief that we're creating. Don't feel, all of the things that the consequences of all of our behaviors, where we've been so conditioned not to feel those things. And it's continued to create this behavior of irresponsibility upon the earth because people have separated themselves from their responsibilities. They only want rights. They don't want the responsibilities that hold up those rights. So now we're finding that all of our rights are being ignored, and that our cries for our rights are empty because there's no foundation of responsibility underneath them. We have to have that balance. And so, I want to hold up that we're feeling all of this stuff in our bodies, and encourage everybody to just take a minute to really, put your roots back into the ground, feel that umbilical connection, close your eyes for a minute, and just, be with that connection with Mother Earth. Feel the pulse of life and that umbilical connection that you have to Mother Earth. Sink your roots down gently, into the Earth Mother, so that you can feel her love radiating up through those roots towards you, despite all we've done to harm her over the years. That mother's love is still there for us. And so we can bring that into our bodies. We can begin to act from this place by connecting ourselves to the original mother, to bring that central voice of the women back into the center of our families, into the center of our communities, to the hearts of our nations, that mother wisdom that teaches us that lesson, Pasida Bumosuwaging Kachibut, that all life is sacred. And bring that awareness into our hearts. So as we move forward, we're able to operate from that place of grounded heart-based wisdom. which is what the essence of the mother really is. It's grounded, heart-based wisdom, guided by intuitive knowing. And so I encourage you all to just bring yourself into that space as we begin this conversation today. And so what I would like to ask all of you is feel free to ask any questions that you have of us. But I also would like to ask you, to share or to ask questions about the things that you're experiencing in your body. What are you experiencing in your physical body, your emotional body, your spiritual body that's connected to this outer consequence of how we have wandered away from that wisdom of that heart-based grounded wisdom of the mother? Where is that coming up for you in your life, and where does that need to be balanced? Because I think that we can share a conversation about that with one another to help one another to reroute ourselves during this time of rapid movement and disconnection, so that we can hold that heart space together across continents, people from all over the world who are watching this. How do we ground ourselves together across continents and reach those roots out, those mother roots out to one another, so that we're holding the ground steady and providing a scaffold for something new to be built upon, that's based in that heart-based wisdom. So please put your questions in the appropriate box in the Q&A. I don't know if somebody's watching the chat as well, but put your comments in the chat or the Q&A, and please join us in conversation today. As I said, me and Miigam'agan have both been going through a great deal recently, and holding up a conversation this heavy takes a lot of energy. So we're reaching out to you and asking you to join us in this conversation today. So whoever's watching the questions, if you could give the questions to us.
Judith, I see a question that was posted in the Q&A. It's a question that actually brings it back to the gift economy. It was also put into the chat. So either place.
The question is from Brian, and it's, I'm curious how you think about the role of money or currency in the liberated future we desire. Brian is powerfully drawn to the concept of maternal gift economy and struggling to imagine how it operates at scale in a post-capitalist future.
I would love to hear Jen answer this question. I'll take the first stab and just say this is what I think. I'm going to recant that comment. It just sounded gross to me. First stab. I'm going to say a few words about this, and then I'm going to pass it to Jen, and then Miigam'agan can jump in. But I think that Brian, one of the things that I think is important is that when we think about currency, we think about value. And when we're thinking about the ways that we've been taught to assign value through this patriarchal capitalistic paradigm, that value oftentimes is at the expense of the well-being of human lives. And so when we start thinking about how do we assign address currency in relation to a mother economy, right? A mothering economy, the maternal gift economy. We have to think about first, because the way that we think about it is oftentimes in relation to depletion, because that's how mothers often are treated within the society, that they give until they're depleted. We oftentimes think about sacrifice of the physical body of the mother. And we have to first go through the process of, one, checking on what our values are assigned to and aligned with. One of the examples that I often use when I'm teaching is that if we really start thinking about all the ways that we express our understanding of value, it's all attached to currency. So how do we value life if everything is attached to currency, to economics, to profitability. There's no possible way for us to correctly value life when we're using that equation. And so we have to first look at the way that we've assigned value. What we hear is all kinds of terminology that tells us that our value in the world is based on our saleability, viewing ourselves as a commodity or a consumer. And so even when we talk about our most personal relationships, when somebody's single, they say that they're on the market. And so we see ourselves as being saleable. We have to correct that thinking. We have to shift that thinking and really challenge ourselves to identify all the ways that we think about ourselves as saleable, all the ways that we view ourselves as a commodity or as a consumer, because if we're viewing ourselves that way, we're also viewing others in the same way, which means that we're viewing life in the same way. And so, that has to be changed. But we also have to shift this notion of martyrdom. I'm working on a book right now called Women Rise Wild. And in that, I talk about all of these stories that we have within Indigenous mythology that talk about like the Corn Mother story, where the Corn Mother's dies and her body is dragged across the cornfield until there's nothing left but bones. And that story has been so Christianized over the years to make the Corn Mother into a martyr for her people. And in truth, what the stories are telling us is that it is the true value, the true nourishment at the center of the community is what is held within the mother. And that's that heart-based, intuitive, grounded wisdom. And so we have to shift the way that we think about things like this. We have to shift the way that we think about, maternal aspects and attributes, and shift that away from sacrifice and martyrdom to abundance and nourishment held within the mother, right? And then we have to move away from the imbalanced view that we have that's based on this patriarchal capitalist model and shift it to a healthy, balanced image. And so how would a healthy, balanced mother behave? A healthy, balanced mother would put on her own air mask before she put on the air mask of anyone else, right? A healthy, balanced mother would make sure that she was nourished and cared for and strong so that she could nourish and care for and make strong everyone around her. She would know that her children are not going to survive if she's depleted and if she can't care for herself. So the way that we look at that here at Wajukam Toltina is that we make sure that all of our mouths are fed, and then whatever we have left over, we give freely without any expectation of return, because that's how we're able to do it. And that's how a healthy, balanced mother operates. We don't hoard, we don't sacrifice, we're not martyrs. There's no sense of depletion. It's the sense of abundance and wholeness and healthy balance. And so it's really a shift in our mindset away from these structures and systems that we've established to one that looks very different than what the Western world knows, one that looks very indigenous, because that's the way that I was brought up. That's how we were taught to behave towards one another, that we recognize Pasilda and Dilnabamak, the primary value of being a Skitchinawak person, being an indigenous person for us here in Wabanaki territory is learning how to be a good relative. And so, that's what a loving, healthy mother teaches you, is how to be a good relative. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Jen.
Thank you so much, Sherri, for that very important grounding and brilliant talk. I think mothers are interested in the child, so they value the other. And that is when they're giving to the other, they give value to the other, to the child, not just to themselves. And that value goes around when you give to somebody else to satisfy their needs, and they give to somebody else again to satisfy theirs. The gift goes around, and that creates abundance. our society, in which we do exchange all the time, and exchange is giving in order to get. It's not giving in order to give value to the other person or to satisfy their needs. It's giving in order to satisfy our own. And we mediate that by money, but it's not only the fault of money, it's the fault of the exchange interaction itself, rather than a gift interaction in which we are affirming the value of the other person. So money just mediates that in a bad way, and it abstracts away from gifting and takes all the attention onto money. And it seems as if you have more money, you're better than anybody else. And if you have, if you can exchange more, you're better. If you're a bigger capitalist, you're better. If you have billions and other people have nothing, it makes you some kind of a giant. But it really shows the emptiness of the spirit of the people that are doing that. And they're just going through some kinds of motions that doesn't actually create even satisfaction for them. You know, if you think of the Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos now that have made so much money, when other people have very little, and they've made it by, you know, taking the gifts of their workers and of everyone. And then what do? They try to make it something even bigger and better by going into outer space. So it abstracts away from humanity and from Mother Earth. And it really is very harmful now. And we have to do something very different. We have to go back to Mother Earth and value one another and value Mother Earth as the source of all of the gifts that we are receiving all the time. So I think money is just an instrument of our own perdition, really, and that we need to learn to go away from it. Maybe we can use it a little bit in some kinds of ways of just in the transition towards a real gift economy with the mother at the center, a matriarchal economy. So thank you. Maybe Miigam'agan would like to speak.
Yes, I was just thinking about that. That's always a question that we have to really think about, and I can draw from my language because there's been a misconception about how the wampum has been labeled as currency. But in our language, when we talk about napskuk or wampum, there's so much more, and we're really fortunate that our languages are still very much present and are a guide reference for us. And our language is, first of all, multi-dimensional, and it holds a whole wider range of understanding both our spiritual ness, first of all. I think if these questions in currency, and we wouldn't be having such an imbalance of way of being if we were connected to those our ancient roots, and if our ancient systems were still intact. But there's been a great disruption for hundreds of generations that has brought all of us up here at this space. So like ancient terms like karma and so on, we get to understand our responsibility as human beings when we begin to have a reference that we are much higher beings than how we've been led to believe today. And so for us, the indigenous languages is, it's not about, it's our own understanding as human beings and that inner wisdom that we continually bring forth balance and restoration. And so that's the visual image that we have. We might be responding to the currency that humanity is responding in this way, where we're working with this reality as wounded adults, and there's a deeper need at such a deep level from that disconnection to our spirituality, or the disconnection of who we are as a people. So all that has created kind of a conflict, inner and outer conflict in this reality. So when we look at those terms, for us, currency is a sacred responsibility to each other. And yes, mothers recognize that we, as Sherri described and Jen described, about that exchange. The exchange is with the understanding of the future. 7 generations is it's so important that we work with our mother, and we were raised with those values, and all of that whole worldview was in place. So today, when we ask those questions, we're asking with that piece of information that we're just now starting to reconnect. But the wampum and the Onapskuk, which is our wampum beads, that's our sacred contract, and how that currency, it's not a currency, it's an acknowledgement of our sacred agreement with each other. The wampum is created by the water community, all the life that's in the oceans, in the river, in the ponds, and the plant community, which is all the vegetation, and the animal community. And we are given that instruction to to string and to maintain or facilitate that relationship. But human beings have been given the responsibility to create the wampum, and we are guided by the wampum. It's just so much more, and it's another area for a long conversation, but it's very rich in and nurturing for our human spirit.
I just would like to add a little bit to that. I think that you know, when we're looking at wampum, which is what oftentimes people refer to as our currency as Indigenous people, as Miigam'agan said, we're looking at that as medicine. And so that's the same way that we think about, you know, the ways that that currency is used, the way that money is used. When we think about those things as medicine, spiritual medicine, emotional medicine, even sometimes offering physical medicine, you know what I mean? If depending on what you're using for currency, if it's medicines, medicinal plants and things like that, that you're sharing with one another. And so when we think about that in terms of medicine, what is medicine used for? This is a really good guide when you're thinking about money. Is what is it being used for? I mean, this is a big question that comes up oftentimes. I've been being asked this question a lot in regards to, you know, like philanthropy or people that want to give back or reparations, that it's about restoring balance and healing divides. It's about, you know, all of the restorative justice practices. By trade, I'm an attorney, practice law very little at this point in time, but, you know, that's what my professional career was before it became something else. Now I only have that. It's probably only about 25% of the work that I do in the world, but When we think about that in regard to restorative justice, it's really about the restoration of balance, because we understand that people, they behave from a place of imbalance when they harm others. They behave from a place of imbalance when they're stealing, because they don't have enough of what they need to be able to get by. Because the system is set up in such a way that it provides this stark contrast where the economic models that exist set up a competition that determines whether somebody can live or die. That's unhealthy competition. That type of competition comes from a sociopathic or psychopathic way of thinking that, I'm going to enter into competition with you, and at the end of this competition, the outcome is going to determine who lives or dies. We would look at that and think that that was barbaric today, right? However, that's how the entire economic system is set up. That's why we have homeless people dying on the streets. That's why we have hunger across the earth that is killing people, not because we lack resources of food and other things, but because people hoard them, people control them, they use them to manipulate people. So it's really about this usage and about shifting that mindset to, how do we use this as medicine, as a source of healing? How do we use this to restore balance? How do we use this to eliminate divides between people? How do we use this in order to equalize the systems that have been set up so inequitably? And so I think that, thinking about it in that way really helps you to shift the way that you're understanding the kind of indoctrination of the current system that you have been mind melded to. It's manipulation. It's all been this cult-like thinking that has moved us into accepting as the status quo something that is such a great threat to life on an individual basis and a species basis, not only for us, but for the other 1 million species that are now in threat of extinction. And so we need to change the way that we need to really restore our humanity and restore the heart of our humanity. That's really at the core of changing our minds about money.
Well, that was a very thorough response to that question and very deep. So do we feel complete with that, Jen, Miigam'agan, and Sherri, before we move on to the next? Okay, great. Judith, do you have another one for us?
This one is from Michelle Scholl. She says, upon planet Earth, what is sexuality? What is the energy of sexuality? How is this energy, this force, this expression of sexuality expressed in a healthy way for all beings? Why has or was sexual energy been co-opted as a means of control, punishment, and an act of war? Why was sexual energy turned into a means of destroying the female, i.e. the girls, women, mothers, grandmothers, when it is the women who give birth to continued life on this planet?
Okay, that's pretty big and deep, but this goes right to the heart of what has been taken out of Mothers at the Center. This person's not holding back and asking that life force energy, what has happened? Who wants to begin that very deep conversation? And it may be not translatable into English. Maybe there are words in your languages, Sherri and Miigam'agan, that more accurately or correctly describe what was taken and how we might come back to a place of what Sherri calls restorative justice and balance in the world with that energy.
I could just bring 2 words that come to my mind in my language is the word Majiet and Wasamiet, and that's drawing life force. When I share that in the language, it's aligned in how Ajiet is the consciousness, that energy of consciousness, how it moves in us, through us, in the inner world, in the outer world, and that we're part of. So that is those today, since our language has been colonized, there's been several books rewritten to reintroduce our language, but through a colonial lens. So, such as when in Miigam'agan, when we say lentuk, it's written in the dictionary now, lentuk means deer. But lentuk is in our language, is a way of being and our relationship to each other. When I say lentuk, it does not mean deer. It's a much more deeper understanding and how my life is connected to the deer and how the deer is connected to me, and that we recognize our how we are an expression of each other. So those words, sexuality, and this is military language. It's always been about severing the life forces and what our deeper understanding of who we are as human beings. So for us, the language reconnects us, and as we decolonize our languages, we're connecting who we are as beings, higher beings, and everything about our way is sacred. And so sexuality is what does that I think it's important for peoples to really look and research in depth what language is meaning and the origin. And I truly believe those are connections. I can't answer really too much more about that, only what I know. And English is not my second language, and it doesn't fulfill me, or it doesn't enfold me as much as my language would, because it brings me to a different, deeper understanding. And this is part of healing for us now. So I'll pass this over.
Value, Needabest. This is I think a question that requires a lot of our time, because these notions have been so distorted. And so in our traditional ceremonies, we have puberty ceremonies, our traditional ways of being, our traditional life way, we have puberty ceremonies. And that was true of all earth-based religions. And what the purpose of those ceremonies were was to be able to help the young person. There was often these physical trials that they would go through. They would do fasts, they would do journeying, all of these things to help them to find the power within them to be able to funnel the energy that was rising up within them into positive action. Because really what sexual energy is it's just that creative energy, right? It's this creative life force energy, and it rises up within us at a time when we have the physical capacity to actually be able to begin creating things out in the world that are going to be helping others. It's not just about creating life. It's about this rising energy of creation. That how do we, bring this energy up, mold it into something, and then deliver that into the world. And so that's what our puberty ceremonies were about, was about helping the young people to find the power within them to be able to manage that energy so that they could become co-creators of this world that we are all sharing in a responsible way. Because when that energy is rising up and it's not being managed, it ends up coming out in all kinds of ways. And so we see that with these modern day rites of passage ceremonies, where you have young people who are their rite of passage is their first sexual encounter, or their first cigarette, or their first drink of alcohol, or their first street drug. that cutting, all of these other ways that young people are expressing the tumult that's rising up in them because nobody's teaching them how to manage the energies that are naturally occurring within them. We want to keep them suppressed. We want to keep them distracted. We want to not be bothered by them. That's become that modern way of dealing with our young people. And so, there's this great understanding about that energy being part of the creative life force. And so, when we think about that, and then we think about the distortion that's come in, because we talked about that last time about this distortion, when we think about the role of the church in the destruction of our humanity. It's supposed to be something that's going to make us more godlike, correct? And it's responsible for the enslavement of Black people. It's responsible for the genocide of Indigenous people. It's responsible for holy wars, for the Inquisition, right? For the witch's hammer, all of these things where religion has been used to actually destroy the essence of our humanity and to place us under control. So we compare Indigenous puberty ceremonies that help the young people manage the energy from within, empowers them to be in control of their own being in ways that help them to be honorable and respectful and to not lash out at others and to not misuse that energy in ways that's going to cause harm. But then it became something that was co-opted by the church, and those ceremonies in puberty began. I recommit myself to being under the control of this organization. It's not I recommit myself to do no harm. It's not I recommit myself to learn how to use this energy to develop a skill set within myself that's going to help other people. It became I become a servant now, and I am obedient to this servitude. And so we look at the distortions to understand the long history, 2 millennia of distortion in regard to sexual energy, and the mislabeling, like Miigam'agan said, this language that this is creative energy, the creative life force. Today, that same energy is being marketed, and you can go to a workshop and you can pay $400 to have somebody teach you how to manifest. Now it's the, what are the words that they're using to call this? No, hold on a minute. I know them. I'm having a brain cramp right now. So you can learn how to, just manifest your own vision boards and your own stuff. The churches are selling it as the abundance gospel now. And so, there's all of this stuff, power of attraction, power of abundance. That's what they're calling it. This is just creative energy, right? This is adolescent learning. This is about learning to manage your co-creative abilities in the world. And so capitalism has reduced that to kindergarten type instruction of, hey, I can use this to get as much stuff as I want. And that's the way that energy has been used. It's been used to get stuff. It's been used to control. It's been mismanaged in such a way that it has become an entire industry. Sex sells, right? And so it's distorted our relationships with one another. It's broken our intimacy. It's disconnected us from our own bodies. And in doing so, it's disconnected us from the very thing that's made us human beings. And so there's a connection here between that and between money, as Letecia indicated, that all of these things are about breaking apart our relationships. They're about separating us from the sacredness of our being. If you're fortunate, that you can share your body with another human being in such a way that elevates your consciousness, that opens up new realms of existence between the two of you. That the joining of those energies can open doorways to worlds that you can never reach individually. That's a sacred thing, right? That's not sexuality. Not in the way that term has been used, right? And so we have to really start to think about, go back to source. where did the word originate? What was it originally connected to? How has it been distorted to mean this thing? I mean, really tracing the etymology of language is an important part of understanding, and that's, you know, been part of the process of decolonizing language for us in our own territories in Miigam'agan. And so, you know, really understanding the roots again helps us to understand what's grown out of them. So if you can see, where was that seed planted, who planted it, and with what intent, then you can start to really recognize the fruit of what's been born of that, and how it's been so distorted and cross-pollinated and used as a weapon. And you know, the question's been deleted now, so I can't go back to it to make sure that I'm answering all of the pieces of it. But you know, essentially that energy on earth is the creative energy. It's the creative energy that allows us to bring forth life, but it also allows us to bring forth ideas and to bring forth you know, inventions that are going to help one another, that are going to uplift us. It's all about being able to have our creative intelligence freed and controlled and empowered from within us, rather than controlled and stifled and manipulated. It's the yin and the yang of understanding that creative force. It's like, you know, the more light there is, the greater the darkness. The greater the darkness, the greater the light. You know, it's that duality. And what we're seeing is the shadow side of this. And so I remember hearing somebody talk about the fact that the whole free love movement of the 60s gave rise to human trafficking. And that human trafficking and all of the things that we're seeing connected to that really erupted within the society as the shadow side of the free love movement. And really, there's an interplay where you could argue, well, no, the free love movement was an attempt to bring light to the shadow side of human trafficking that goes back to 3000 BCE, where the woman's body became the first commodity on the exchange market to give land or protection for land to the father. And so, you know, there's all of this that's connected to these notions of sexuality and the sexual value of the body of, you know, it's largely been the woman, but it's also been young men. Now, young men have been just as victimized by this distortion of this idea of sexuality as a commodity. It's a commodifying and distorting and dirtying the notion of creative possibility that exists between two people, the creative possibility of having them whole and intact, and being able to bring forth what they were born to bring forth, the creative potential of what you can create with another person, the creative potential of partnership that's balanced and that's healthy, and you know, levels of intimacy that allow for us to truly know one another beyond ideas of sexuality that get distorted because of the distortion in the ways that we've been taught to think about sexuality. It actually interferes with our ability to be able to be intimate even with ourselves, because we think, oh, intimacy is sexuality. Oh, I get it. It's kind of taboo, right? Free your minds, and, you know, free your bodies, and free your spiritual expression and your creative intelligence by shifting the way that you understand that, not as sexual energy, but as creative energy. To me, that's what I think about when I think about that question, is that, you know, here's another thing where a foundational law of the universe, a creative energy, creative potential, has been distorted and turned into a commodity, and turned into a commodity that is oftentimes used as a weapon in order to maintain the status quo and to keep those who have the ability to create in the most obvious, tangible way, the givers of life, has kept them suppressed and oppressed and kept their voices silent. So all of that stuff in my mind is connected. And so it's like an unraveling of all of that to get to the truth of that. So I wrote a little bit about that in Sacred Instructions, and I'm going to write a lot lot more about it. Well, I have already. There's going to be a lot more about that creative energy in the follow-up to sacred instructions, because that's part of our challenge right now, is graduating from creating vision boards and wanting to manifest more stuff to actually collectively reaching out and creating a world that we would all want to inhabit collectively and individually. So thanks for that question, Michelle.
Thank you, Sherri, Miigam'agan, and Jen. Did you have something that you wanted to offer there, or are we? You have anything you want to say there?
Well, I think going back to the commodity, it's the commodity exchange, commodification, that what our society is, our economy is based on, this exchange, really is a sort of mechanism that distorts us. It turns us into something other than what we should be, what we have a chance to be as the creative beings that Sherri's talking about. So any kind of commodification of what should not be commodified is wrong. And haven't we been commodifying water and seeds and the earth and people now for 1,000 years, and more recently, and that's where we're going wrong. Well, that's what we really need to think about and change, and substitute it by gift giving. That's it.
Thanks, Jen. I think this question is so vitally important, really, because this natural energy, this is for me one of the going back to what Miigam'agan and Sherri all point to, which is our humanity, what it means to be a human being, to allow this life force energy to move through us to become co-creators. And the patriarchy focalizes that energy to our genitalia, or places that have been identified as specific places for this life force energy to be as an attraction. And we are beings. This energy runs freely through us. Our skin is the largest sensual organ that both receives and gives us information. And our organs on the inside are also picking up simultaneously. So this energy is constantly running through us. It's not just being focalized into one particular organ in any one moment. So we need to free ourselves up, as Sherri said, release the Kraken and and allow this energy to run through us so that we can become co-creators again, and not diminish it to a commodity, not try to condense it down and create a value into a thing. Like, I love my mouse. I don't use a computer without a mouse, but I don't put my energy into this mouse, and I don't hoard mice. No. So allow yourself to just be yourself in your body with this energy. And that may help shift an opening to understand the gifts and how your gifts are commodified both by yourself and others. And not to shame or blame people, but to create an awareness so that we can move forward together in a way of more balance and harmony. So, Sherri?
Yeah, I also, we have to really look at the power dynamic. Like when you're saying release the Kraken, how much more clear of an image do we need to understand why there's been a suppression and distortion of sexuality? There is nothing more intoxicating, more influential than a woman in her full power. I would say probably the same thing is true about a man if it's healthy, balanced power. You know, if we're in our full, healthy, balanced power, because we have women who are just as distorted by the patriarchy as some of the men are. You know, we have women who are, you know, that whole representation of the patriarchy in a pantsuit. And so we have to also recognize that essence of power that's possible when we are fully embodying all of our creative intelligence and just having that energy dance within us. When we're in that place and we know who we are and we're not restricted, we are a thing to behold. And that's why it's been so frightening. That's why it's so distorted, because you have a much harder time controlling somebody who knows exactly who they are, who's fully expressed, fully embodied, and in their full power. How do you control a person like that? Well, you shame them about their body. You shame them about sexuality. You take creative energy and you turn it into a taboo within the religious system that controls the society. You know, all of these ways that our power has been taken from us can be seen in all of the things that we're addressing. And so when we bring this back to the children, you know, I just saw this beautiful piece of artwork that was done by a Native artist where they took that quote that they tried to bury us, but they didn't know that we were seeds. And someone took that quote about these children and said, and added to it, seeds that would rise up and awaken a nation. And I think that they're awakening more than one nation here, right? And so when we think about the taking of those children away from their mothers, killing those children, putting them into the earth to try to silence their voices. When we think about all of the violence that's attached to the creative energy in that act, that creative energy that flowed through the mother and the father that created that child, the creative energy that lives within that child and the potential of that into the future, that all of that really is connected to the defilement and the continued taking from the original mother, from the first woman, Mother Earth. And it's all about the land. It all goes back to the land. It all goes back to the taking of the land, the removal of bodies. I had a conversation with a young relative of mine the other day who had the great misfortune of trying to kill a spider in my house. And so I asked, you know, why are you trying to kill the spider? What is the spider doing to you? You know, they're just over there minding their own business. Well, they're in my space. I said, so they're in your space? Like, who said this was your space? This is my house. Well, you know, they're in my bubble. Okay, so you're claiming this spot in my house as your bubble, and you're going to kill another living being in my house because they're in your bubble. You know, most people just let them kill the spider and they move on, right? But not when you come to my house. So be forewarned if you ever come to my house. And then I brought it back to saying, yeah, you know, that's exactly what the colonizers did to us. They came in and they said, hey, we want to claim this bubble and now we're going to kill you. I said, so that spider is a representative of your ancestors. You know, that's that spider right there is giving you a chance to be a different person than those who colonized and killed your ancestors. You know, how can we live in peaceful coexistence with others without having to take what's theirs, whether it be their land, their bodies, their creative life force, you know? And so all of these things are connected together in so many ways. And when we think about the ways that we instinctually behave, that's opposed to the free expression of that creativity, which is born in the purest sense, right? It's born out of the purest energy of creation. And that it's been suppressed and it's been distorted and it comes out sideways and often hits the person that's beside you because it's not allowed to flow through its natural systems, we can begin to understand that it's really all about power, control, and taking. And so if we can shift our mindset about empowering and giving, right, and living in a way that is in opposition to that suppression and taking and controlling that we have been subject to for millennia. And we can begin to emotionally and spiritually take responsibility for ourselves and grow up. Then we have this incredible capacity to be able to create change. And so I think one of the most important things that I ever heard this woman say, we were both speaking at a climate change conference together, and she said, why are we collectively creating a world that none of us would want to live in individually? Like, the world as it exists today is not the choice of anyone living a healthy, balanced life. It's dangerous. It's not abundant. It's not nurturing. It's not any of the things that we would want to have for ourselves individually. Yet collectively, we're co-creating this together. Why are we doing that? Because we've been told that we don't have the power to do anything different, that it's just too hard. This is the way it is. So that harnessing of that energy, that distortion and that taking of that energy is the taking of our power to be able to change the system, and we need to claim that back. That's the whole tipping point of revolution, is us changing that back. And so I would encourage you all to reclaim that energy, that autonomy of your being, by reclaiming your creative potential and connecting with others who are interested in doing the same and co-creating something amazing that's going to move us all forward.
I see Jen is putting a fist up, like a fist bump to that. You know? Yes, I think we can all feel right into that. Miigam'agan, did you have anything that you wanted to share after listening to the good words of Sherri?
I don't have too much to share other than just to support what's been said, and in reference to just the work that we've been doing. And but I do want to add something that I reached out to a few members in my networks from our conversations with the unearthing of the children across the lands, and so and the intent of those bringing those systems in is really like, these are all something that we are as mothers. This is a human history that has happened over and over again all over the world. The children, whether they've been unearthed, whether they're in cages, whether they're being marketed out there, you know, this is a global crisis. And what we need to be doing is, with the fist that is coming forward, you know, it's unity of calling upon the sacred fierceness of Mother Bear in protecting her cubs. So if this is the one thing that we need to, if this can't pull us together as women, as grandmothers, I don't know what will. And I think we need to be looking at that and finding ways to hold hands and raise this or shift this reality in every circle, every place in all of our lives. The children, in my language, we say Miigam'agan or Nijan. They are the universes. And so when we were talking about our sexual powers, they hold a much I don't want to use power, but Miigam'agan, they hold all the life force in them, and they are the portals to all the realms, the spiritual realms, and here. And so what they see and what they feel is where our prophecies come from. So we need to be creating an environment, a sacred environment for these little beings to be in, because they are imprinting and they are emitting the reality that we are that we have created for them to experience. So they are going to mirror all that back to us and to the future generations and to all of what they now say that is simulation. That's the power. Miigam'agan is holds all those multiple universes, and that's what they're going to push forward. I can't stress that enough. They are, and women hold these eggs. We hold truly the seeds in our bodies. So I want this to be echoed out, amplified deeply in our hearts, and so we bring this, we carry this light, and that they will respond to it too. So I know we're coming close to it, and I just want to bring that forth, and it must be something. Thank you for giving me this.
We still have quite a bit of time, and I see that there is a hand. Jen, did you put your hand up? She's very carefully putting her finger to the air. First, we got her fist, and now she's okay. Jen.
Years ago, when I first went back to the United States from Italy, I was, it must have been 40 years ago. I was in the taxi with a black taxi driver who I was having a conversation with, and I'd just been in a feminist meeting, and I was talking to him about feminism, and he said, I always just wonder why, if feminism is so important, the women that were in the plantation, the white women in the plantations did not have more solidarity with the Black women who were slaves, and they were not able to turn things over. And that has been a question to me for a long time, until I just read a part of an essay about how the white women were completely in league with the men in the slave ownership and the ways they were acting towards the African American women. And how is it that we can stop doing that? we have to not do it anymore. The whole movement of white women has to stop doing that kind of thing. We have to realize, for the children of the world, for the mothers of all of the other mothers, and for the men and for nature, we have to change that. So it is really a question of getting rid of the what do you call it, class education, or the patriarchal education that we have imbibed. We've taken it up and done it according to their laws, and we are mothers. We have children. We know how to act in a maternal way and in another oriented way. We don't have to be capitalist, patriarchal people, and we have to create a movement together with all of the women of the world to change this, and the men too.
Thank you, Jen. It's a very powerful statement that we need to call on every mother, regardless of color, regardless of location, to rise up and stand for the children. And it's vital that we create places of multi-generational conversations, not just single-aged or group-aged people, so that we can learn to listen again to each other, to allow the children to see what it means to be a graceful elder, what it means to be a frustrated adult, and that we can still show up and work together to be able to come to a common future. So I want to encourage everyone, wherever you are, to be challenged to do that, because these children have wonderful words of wisdom to share in the most simple ways. They're not convoluted. So we need to learn to listen differently, in the same way we need to learn to listen to the earth and to the water and to the trees. We've just been so overly abstracted in our busyness. And I just want to thank the three of you for your just brilliant words right now in this flow, because it brings me to tears to see this rallying cry for all the mothers. And we have another really good question that's come in. But before I do that, is there anything, Sherri, Miigam'agan, you'd like to say before we actually engage in this next question in the Q&A?
I just want to say that, I raised my fist to Jen when she was saying that. I don't know if she saw. But I think that it's important to recognize that by many white women, Black and brown women are still not seen as being fully human. So we're not viewed as being their kin. We're not viewed as being kindred to them. We're not viewed as being their sisters in this struggle. In fact, there was a white woman who spoke up on the March on Washington because she was being forced to be more intersectional and this is one of the organizers, be more intersectional in the choices of women that she chose. Like, Indigenous women don't have to just be representing Indigenous issues. They can talk about other things that interest them. You have 6 different white women. They all have individual areas of expertise and interest, but then you have one Indigenous woman and you have one Black woman, and they're only allowed to represent their issues, right? Black women have a lot more visibility on the larger stage than Indigenous women, because we're still being suppressed, because this is still our land, right? And so there's this concerted effort to still continue to suppress Indigenous peoples, which is why Indigenous women are the most hunted people on the planet. And so there first has to be a move to see us as being fully human, to see us as sisters, to recognize the purposefulness of the separation that exists between white women and Black and brown women, in order for us to be able to actually even stand up together that recognition has to take place first.
Thanks, Sherri. Miigam'agan, do you have anything you want to say before we actually move on to this next question? Okay, great. Judith, could you read the question that's in the Q&A for us so we can have a response?
Actually, what I was going to do is Kathy Wallace has been carrying on a conversation all along here. And so I'd like to read some of her comments, all of which came in as these things were being discussed. And I think some of them are very good. So it's just going to be a little bit disconnected because each of these came in as they were talking about this issue. Kathy Wallace says, for 25 years, part of my prayers is, may my sexual life force energy fire my dreams into reality. And then when they were talking about money, she was thinking how it's replaced reciprocity. So we don't understand gifting and reciprocity. The money is always holding excess. So the impulse to take is to get rid of it. And there's nothing honorable. Whereas in gifting, the reciprocity, we are always in the present moment, and we engage in right relations with each other. And we don't have that with money, so that's out of balance. And on the subject of interconnectedness, she says 90% of us exist outside our body with all our relations, and we're interconnected with our relations, and so open and see and honor and engage in right relations. And on her latest comment is the most powerful offense and defense was the wedge. So to offer structures that allow that community come together rather than all of us having to try to live in survival mode in isolation and separation. The spiral structure is the answer, and she's working with that now. So I just throw those out in case, and it inspires any further comments, and then I'll go back to an actual question.
Did any of you, Jen, Miigam'agan, or Sherri, want to respond to that? I've been reading the comments, so it's sort of been along those lines. But Kathy, thank you so much for all of your wonderful words that you've been typing in. I think they sort of speak for themselves. So, Judith.
Okay. We have also a comment question from Betsy Webb. Your talk about us all over the planet, sending our roots to support our Earth Mother and join with each other. It makes me think about the book, The Little Prince, where the prince is concerned that the baobab trees would grow so big that their roots would destroy this planet. But really, as you said, usually roots hold things together. Roots hold the earth. So I can see that your matrifocal way of looking at the world honors the earth and our connection, our roots in it, in opposition to the patriarchal model of the roots destroying the earth. So the comment is on the question of roots and how we're all held together. And I think about the various books that have been coming out lately about how the mother tree and how the trees nourish each other through the roots. And also I've been reading a number of books, both biography and fiction, about Indigenous issues. So if you want to comment on the question of the roots and the trees and the role of books and literature in raising our consciousness.
Well, that's a lot because I know that Sherri has 3 books that she's writing at the same time. Is that correct, Sherri? 2? Yeah.
2 right now. I mean, 2 right now, and I've done 7 anthologies during COVID.
Wow.
Yeah, so.
Is there a chance that you would be able to send us the names of those anthologies and we would be able to put that up with this recording so that people can find that? Or are they on your website?
They're not on my website. I need to get,
Okay.
I need to, my website's being redesigned right now.
Okay.
And so they're not on my website. I've posted them all like on my public Facebook page, but I can send them to you. Some of them aren't out yet. I actually wrote a chapter on Miigam'agan for a book on Wabanaki women. So, which was one of the greatest honors that I've had. But I mean, if we're going to think about books, I think that when we're looking at historical documents, oftentimes we're looking at the contrast because there was so much censorship. And all of these, I've said it over and over again at ASWM conferences and when we've gathered that people spend so much time trying to find reflections of matriarchy, matrifocal, matricultural ways of being in books so that they can prove the validity of its existence within the patriarchal paradigm. And I just say, stop doing that. Self-empower, self-authorize, be sovereign, have a recognition of your constitutional rights of autonomy within your own sovereign being, if you want to have some authority for that. And so I think that, we have to really think about that because oftentimes what we're looking at as what she, was it Betsy that you said this? What Betsy said was that, how it was just the opposite of what she had read in this very, very well-known book that many of us know the story, right? And so we're looking for the propaganda that has been so deeply embedded in all of the educational materials, but also in our fiction, in our religious indoctrination, within the social gospel, all of the ways that these things have uprooted us, and how we can then, very gently and in a nurturing way, replace those roots into the ground, and water them with the truth of our own knowing. I think that we have to really be willing to stand up against the authority of the patriarchy, because when we're trying to legitimate ourselves within that paradigm, we're actually empowering them. How do we stand up against that patriarchal power? It's by acknowledging the authority within our own ways of knowing, ways of being. We fought really, really hard. One of the things that I did in the course of my other work is to get work with others to get Executive Order 13001 1301 passed, which is to include spiritual elders into consultation requirements. Those who keep the traditions, those who are the knowledge keepers, they're not the PhDs, they're not elected officials, they're not academics, but those people are the ones who have the knowledge that is going to carry us forward, that has carried us from the past. And so when we think about the ways that we try to legitimate ourselves within the current power structures, we have to really challenge ourselves to think about how is that actually empowering and authorizing the continuation of the power structure of the patriarchy, by saying you have the right to legitimate my knowledge. You have the right to validate my own knowing of who I am as Gijinawe as a woman. Right. So, those types of things I think we need to be really aware of when we're thinking about how books have an influence. How do we challenge that sense of knowing? How do we stop saying, hey, you know, if you can't verify it through a patriarchal tome, doesn't mean that it's not true. And stand up for our own truths. So that's my soapbox talk about that. But I also think that we do need to be able to engage in conversation with one another about the need for us to reroot our humanity. We need to be able to engage in conversation about the fact that our humanity has been uprooted, and that what we're fighting for right now is not just survival of the planet. The women that are standing out on the line and getting arrested in Minnesota because they're trying to put this oil and gas pipeline through all of the wild rice lakes in Minnesota. That's not just about, oil and gas. That's about destroying an entire cultural way of being. That's about destroying Mother Earth. That's still the destruction of the mother. And they're not just standing up for protection of one thing. They're standing up in protection of the heart of humanity. And so we need to be conscious of all of the ways that we can connect with one another, and look for those who are out there. The women, where are all of the other women? There's a million of them that'll march on DC, but where are they when their protection of the first woman, Mother Earth? Why aren't there a million women in Minnesota, standing with those grandmothers who are being arrested and violently handled because they're trying to protect not only their entire cultural way of being, but the water that's sacred to life? Where are they in recognizing that the companies that are doing this, primarily Enbridge, is actually being guided by a group of attorneys that call themselves Indian killers? Because what they're really trying to do is to destroy Indigenous rights because it's an impediment to corporate progress. It's not about, one pipeline in Minnesota. It's about the destruction of Indigenous land rights. That's why they're purposely and consistently and systematically targeting Indigenous communities and pushing these pipelines through, because every time they do, they diminish Indigenous rights. And Indigenous lands are the last lands on the planet that have not been destroyed. And if people can put that connection together, right, talk about being rooted in awareness. If they can put that connection together and start showing up en masse to stop this, we might have a shot of saving the planet, which will give us a shot at actually saving our humanity. And then once we do all of that, then we can, hold hands around the globe and really get to work in changing all of these conditions and this conditioning within our minds that has so distorted us. But we first have to save the planet so we have a place to do our work. And then we have to save the heart of our own humanity to be able to get to that place where we can do that work.
Thanks, Sherri. Some of us attended the Association of the Study of Women in Mythology Symposium not too long ago, 2 weeks ago. And I think the panel that Sherri was on and Miigam'agan were on actually demonstrates, because Jen asked the question, so is academia mostly propaganda for patriarchy and the market? And then isn't it all wrong? By having Miigam'agan and Sherri on panels within this very academic realm, it shifted a conversation that broadened it by being able to have the truth of what's happening on the planet in our host land in the United States. And I think it's very important that we create those places. And when we enter into those places, those of us who are speaking from inside of our cultures, to not allow the projection of the patriarchy to interfere with how we need to bring our the truth of who our people are. And then I think that because academia also is a place that asks questions that are just too narrow. They're not broad enough. They're not inclusive enough. And that's what's all wrong. The lack of inclusivity, the lack of awareness of connection, the assumption that the I is European and history is rooted in European history. That is absolutely not true. And at that conference, at the very last panel, by design and also in beauty, for those of you who don't know the work of Suppressed Histories Archive and Max Dachau, she broadened the view by taking the theory of Maria Gimbutas and showed around the planet how there is a co-arising, which means that it wasn't Africans or Europeans that influenced Polynesia, that they're, because we're human. And Sherri and Miigam'agan have said throughout everything they've shared that we need to become human again and find our hearts in this. Because each culture has its own wisdom, which means whatever your roots are, when you put them into the earth, be they mixed, you're blessed by many different voices and ancestors and perspectives. But your ancestors have wisdom that sings through your body that's begging to be listened to, I believe. So I just want to say that, Jen, do you have anything else that you want to say in relationship to your comment? Because in some ways, it can be extremely restrictive because most people who are in academia, when you're writing a paper, you have to read a lot of dead white men, even if you're writing about women's history. So it's very curious, the whole thing. Go on, Jen.
Well, I think it's based on what this writer Salon talks about as the exchange abstraction. That is, the very process of exchange makes us think in abstract ways, and that is mixed in with patriarchy, and that's what our academic world, our European academic world has done, because I think, as I said before, I think that the market and the act of exchange and money they're driving us crazy. And we have created this superstructure of academia that's crazy. And that is what is validating the ways we are acting to destroy the planet and each other. That's what I think.
Thanks, Jen. If Sherri or Miigam'agan, you don't have anything else to contribute, I do know that there have been comments, but really this question that seems to be a good question to respond to. So Judith, could you just read the question?
You mean the one from Brian Stout?
Yeah, the one that's in the Q&A.
Okay. He's interested to hear you speak to meeting needs versus attending to needs. He suspects one of the fears of our scarcity mindset is that there isn't enough for everyone. It feels a little too pat to say there's enough for everyone. How do we speak to finitude and constraints in an honest way that doesn't reinforce a scarcity paradigm?
I would like to start on that one, if you don't mind. I think this is a really great question, because I think that one of the things that happens oftentimes is that people believe that they're being helpful by helping others meet their needs. But oftentimes what that is it's a real paternalistic way of showing up where I'm going to give you what you need to meet your needs, without actually having a discussion about what that person often needs, and then getting angry when somebody refuses the help that's being offered because it's not really what they need, but you think that you're meeting people's needs. So when I think about the distinction between meeting needs and attending to needs, when you're attending to, you're actually listening. You're actually being present with another person. You're asking them what they need. You're attending to what they're telling you that their needs are, or what you're right there witnessing, based by being fully present in that moment with them. And so that whole issue of paternalism is a real obstacle to progress for us in regard to really helping to heal some of the deepest wounds, because we have a lot of people who bring this paternalistic mindset, right? That they know how to help people. They know what these people need, even though they've never had the lived experience that these people have had, even though they don't share the history that's these people have risen out of. And so, we even have trouble with that in our own territory, with people claiming to be Native because they have a relative from way far back, and claiming a history that doesn't belong to them. And then saying, oh, we need this based on this, which distorts the view of what's actually needed by those who have had that lived experience. So that distinction between meeting needs and attending to needs is really about shedding paternalism and being fully present in the moment. And I think that, there is enough for everyone. And when we say that, it's not to be cavalier, but to recognize that there are problems with distribution, equitable distribution of the things that people need. There is a problem with inequitable systems and structures that have created an imbalance. There is a problem with the destruction of Mother Earth, and the impediment of Mother Earth to be able to provide for all of us due to the destruction that we have caused as human beings. Those are all of the things that actually interfere with us being able to achieve this state of enough, this essence of enough that I wrote about in Sacred Instructions, and understanding Mama Bizu and Alabizu, individual need for enough and the collective need for enough being indistinguishable and inseparable. That I, as an individual, can't have enough unless everyone has enough. That's a core value of our people. And so when we think about this concept of enough, we have to bring Mother Earth as a living being into the equation. Because if we take Mother Earth as a living being out of the equation, there's never going to be enough, because we're harming her faster than she can heal. And we're consuming faster than she can create. Not because it's really what we need, right? It's not attending to our needs or meeting our needs. It's meeting ideals of excess and hoarding and greed and distortion. And so those are the things that need to be addressed in order for us to really deal with this question of attending to people's actual needs, and whether or not we can answer the question of enough, of what is enough. Somebody can say, I don't have enough, but they have a whole silo full of grain that they'll never eat by themselves individually in their lifetime. But they need to have that. They say that's one of my needs, is I need to have that to feel secure. But that's not a realistic need. That's a need born out of fear, right? That's part of this distorted society. And coming in and offering something that somebody needs over here that they know makes their life better, and that they think is going to solve the problems of somebody living over here who has very different needs, is paternalistic, thinking that you can control. And I think that's a big part of the problem with philanthropy also, is that people who are, and I'm thinking that because it's grant season for us right now, so this is like strong in my mind, like we're arguing with people over, well, you have to meet these requirements in order to be able to get funded, versus here are the needs that I have. Would you like to help support this work by meeting these, attending to these needs? And so that's a big question, I think, that we need to really think about. And I also want to encourage there being a session on the question of what is human? What does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be human living in this world right now? I think that's a really good question, because when I think about that question that was posed in the chat, there are words in the language, that that talk about what does it mean to be human? Who are we as human beings? Where do we fit into this larger scheme of creation? And that's all stuff that's found in the language that there's no time to get into here today, but I think that would be a great session, having a panel on what does it mean to be human.
Thanks, Sherri. We've gotten a heads up from Jen on that one. And I'm just giving us a time check. We have about 4 minutes left. So I'm wondering if Jen or Miigam'agan, you'd like to say some closing words. And Sherri, if you take a minute, and then we can come back to Sherri with some closing words, and then I'll take a minute to close us out for today's session. So Jen, do you have something you'd like to say?
Well, just that gratitude is an important part of the gift economy, and I'm very grateful to Miigam'agan and Sherri for coming and giving us their words and thinking and sharing with us that kind of thinking that will bring us to peace for the earth and for each other everywhere and our children. Thank you.
Thanks, Jen. Miigam'agan, do you have some words you'd like to offer before I close us out?
Thank you. In listening to Sherri and Jen, I think it's just important to know that when we talk about roots and about what has been sought out by the mothers of the world, especially in the academic grandmothers who've been in the academic community, the ancient languages are a profound key to reconnecting to our humanity, because a language was formed by our inner world and our relationship to life. It was they were in the form, and we understood them as our mother tongue. And so now, I feel since the disconnections, how humanity have been disconnected through those that system that Sherri was talking about, patriarchy and the economy. What's happening is that the disconnection has created deficiency in us. So we're operating from that. Patriarchy has been disconnected from the heart and from the mother. And so the deficiency of that is what has created the great illness and imbalance. And so when we're not deficient, we feel full. And just as I shared about the children, we have not even begun to understand our full potential. And the children have been so central in Indigenous people and mothers, because that they are forming that abundance. They're forming the life that we're all dreaming about. And so and it's out of love, not from fear. And fear is what causes deficiency. And so we're just forming a reality that's not necessary, that doesn't really have to happen if we. Anyway, I'm running out of time, but losing words here. Thank you. That's all I want to say. Thank you for the questions and bringing us here together. So much gratitude.
Thanks, Miigam'agan. Sherri, do you have some closing words you'd like to say before?
I just want to say thank you to everyone for being here, for Jen for holding the space for this conversation, for Miigam'agan for her, the space that she holds in my life, and for all that she offers to her community, her people, her family, and to you, Letecia, for always corralling us and keeping us on track, because we could just spiral out to the universe if we let us. So just gratitude, as Jen said, for everyone. So Kachiwali.
Thank you. Thank you, Sherri and Miigam'agan and Jen, for your contributions today. And especially Sherri and Miigam'agan, I know that this is a big time for you all, with as much as being brought to the surface to be healed, transformed, and renewed, for taking this time. Judith, for being ever vigilant in the chat and for the questions, Diane in our tech, and for the International Feminists for the Gift Economy Network, for all of your support. Please join us in 2 weeks for Salon number 18. We are pleased to have Barbara Mann back speaking on the twinned cosmos of the Indigenous America, and she will tell you about her orientation and her people's view. Joining Barbara from Finland is Karina Kailo, who will be speaking on appropriating the bare rituals of rebirth, maternal gifting versus exchange of women. And she's speaking from her bare mythology from Finland. So not to be confused, she's not appropriating from Native American traditions. In Finland, they have a bear tradition themselves. So we will be posting the video of today's salon on our website, maternalgifteconomymovement.org. If you want to be notified of our upcoming salons and events, sign up for our notification mailing list at our website. We welcome your questions. So please send them to us, and any comments to maternalgifteconomy@gmail.com. And as Sherri said, it's this very important question: what does it mean to be human? So I want to leave you with that thought so that you can hold that and ask yourself that question over and over again, and how your heart can open to this next transformation of what needs to happen on the planet for our reconnecting with the mothers, the grandmothers, and the children. And then the second thing I'd like to bring us back to, which opened us up, was about currency. Currency is a sacred responsibility, and we need to change our thinking, our moneyed thinking, to what it means to have a sacred responsibility with all of our resources. And with that restoration and social justice that we all stand for, please take care of yourselves. Here in this area of Austin, Texas, the Delta version of the COVID virus is clogging up. There are only 11 intensive care beds in our county. So it's not that the virus itself is difficult, but all the other things that are happening with people who need emergencies are not being able to be attended to. So take care of yourself and your loved ones. Stay safe, and especially be kind to one another. So would all the panelists just unmute and say your goodbyes? Judith and Diane too, if you'd like, turn on your cameras. Thank you everybody for your attention, your comments, and your questions. Take good care.
Lalia.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Lalia. Thank you, Lalia.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Apchich.